and I love the way he puts this. I love the way he puts it. He puts it, if product is about creating core product value, then growth is about connecting more people to that value. What I like about this is that that's not always about putting more people into the top of the funnel, but often, in fact, growth is about reducing the friction in connecting those people to the product, to the value that you've created in your product, and reducing the friction within your product to having them receive that value. So it's not always about pouring people into the top of the funnel. Very often it's about removing the friction, the bottlenecks within your product to get them to that product value that you've created. And I think that's a fantastic way to think about growth and how to think about a growth marketing funnel. And how it's juxtaposed to how you might think about, or how people or founders generally think about traditional marketing, where traditional marketing is very much just around the top of the funnel, right? It's about how do you generate awareness and acquisition and kind of pour prospects or leads into the top of your funnel, whereas growth marketing or growth focuses far more on steps further down the funnel. How do you activate new customers who have just signed up to your product? How do you get them to experience that that first unique kind of value that your product delivers? How do you retain them? So once you've acquired them, how do you ensure that they receive that customer delight and come back to use your product? How do you generate revenue out of them and have them become advocates, so drive referral? So growth marketing looks at the entire stage.
Hello? Hey, so I'm so sorry. Can you mute yourself, please? Ohita, can you?
Great. Cool. So growth marketing, very much looking across the funnel. And what's interesting that we observe as Founders Factory, seeing dozens of startups come through our program, is that it's startups and founders that drive growth from steps further down the funnel, that are able to achieve long-term, scalable, predictable growth. And these are really the steps that the growth should focus on. One of the other questions that I often get as a growth marketing specialist is, Steve, I'm a founder of an early stage startup. I'm thinking about a ton of different things. I'm growing my team. I'm building product. I'm hiring new people. I'm finding investors for my business. I don't really have time for this. Can you just give me one tactic that's going to help unlock explosive growth for my startup? Just give me that one hack, that one trick, that one tactic, the one secret that's going to unlock for growth for my startup. And very often we see like growth charts that looks like this, right? The hockey stick growth chart that looks like this. We see them on TechCrunch or startup blogs, and everybody looks at this and goes, wow, look at this startup, look at the hockey stick growth the startup managed to obtain. And the question that they pose to me is, Steve, just tell me what the tactic was, what that one trick was that startup used at that very point there. And I want to take that tactic and I want to apply it to my startup. But actually the question that founders should be asking themselves is not what that startup was doing at that point, but rather what are all the small steps that startup was taking that built up to that point? And what are all the small steps that they continue to take after that point to maintain that kind of hockey stick trajectory? And to ask yourselves that question as tech founders and entrepreneurs has got absolutely nothing to do with that actual tactic and everything to do with the process. So to identify and to understand what it is that startups do prior to that point and all the steps that they take after that point has got nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with the process. And I'll unpack the reasons as to why it is process over tactics. The first reason is that what works for others may not necessarily work for you. So your audience is different, your product is different, your businesses or your startup's business model is different, your customer journey is different, your startup and your business is different, plain and simple. And so what works for others, that one hack that worked for others may not necessarily work for yours. The second point that's really important as to why process over tactics is the rapid change and acceleration, or the rate of change that happens across different channels. And And so I always use these great examples of like our growth teams that work at Founders Factory Africa, and some of the tactics that we find working for the startups that come through our program. What we were doing, what was working in Facebook 6 months ago is very different from what is working in Facebook today. And so that rate of change that is happening across channels is accelerating at such a rapid rate that if you look back and you look at what worked for startups 6 months ago and you try and apply that to your own business, there is a very good chance that that channel is either the customers or audiences have moved on, or that channel is no longer working. And so you need to find your own unique set of variables that can kind of unlock growth for your business. And that's the last point, is that in order to build that repeatable, scalable growth for your business, you need to look at a process and not that one-off hack or that tactic that worked for other business at one point in time. I always kind of posit that the worst thing that happened to our industry was this framing of the word growth hacking, where it's kind of just this thought of this hack or this one-off trick that unlocked growth. And so really it comes down to these three key factors as to why a process over tactics. So what does a growth process look like? And I often get this look from founders. They go, oh, kind of their eyes roll back into their heads, and they go, oh, Steve, not another process, right? We've got so many processes, surely not. And I'll kind of unpack the reasons why. If we look at the actual process, it's a very simple 5-step process. It starts with brainstorming or ideating around those growth levers. So identify the areas that you believe you have a hypothesis around, areas or aspects or channels, most often for early stage startups, that will unlock growth for your business. The second part is we understand that startups have constraints, right? There are resource constraints, there's financial constraints, there are time constraints. So one of the most important steps in this process is prioritizing those ideas. And so once you've determined the areas that you want to explore or experiment around, the key step there is to prioritize those experiments that you want to start with, because your time is limited, the team that you have to work with is limited. So you need to identify those areas that you want to prioritize and and focus on the areas that give your startup the best chance of success. And then the next step is basically just to ship it, right? Get shit done. This is implement the experiments, run them as quickly as possible, and get them out there. The next step is fairly straightforward, and that's analyze what you have shipped, identify the why. Why have things worked? Why haven't they worked? What has worked? And what can you systemize? What can you identify as fundamental principles or tactics within these experiments that have worked, and what can you systemize? What can you build into a team? What can you basically use for long-term, sustainable, predictable growth? And after you've systemized those, how do you feed that back into your flywheel, right? How do you identify more areas off the back of that analysis and systemization? How do you identify other areas of that you want to explore to unlock growth? And so ultimately, it's this simple process. One of the other things that I always tend to focus on, that it's not how well you do each step or how quickly you do each step. It's actually how quickly you complete the entire cycle. The quicker that you can complete this flywheel, the quicker that you get the feedback and start feeding into new areas that you want to explore, the faster you can grow your business, the more experiments you can run, the more leverage you can generate, and kind of sustainable, predictable growth you can discover. So that's the kind of underlying principle of our growth process. Oh, see, it's skipping ahead here. So you might be asking yourself, okay, all well and good. Understand the principle of a process over tactics. How does this apply to early stage startups? I kind of always lean back on the experience that we have and the kind of 10,000-foot view of these dozens of startups coming through Founders Factory Africa's program. We also focus on some of the challenges that founders have with early stage businesses, and some of the key principles or one of the underlying factors that we observe. The number one factor for startups is often funding, right? Is how do we how do we achieve milestones and give investors enough evidence that to provide them with to invest in our businesses. And the number one principle for investors investing in early stage businesses is, can they show traction? And so I'm going to go through in the next couple of slides here exactly how early stage businesses can find traction. We often, through our observations, propose and present this fantastic book called Traction. It was a book developed by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayers, and they observed hundreds of startups across the continent, across the world, in fact, and identified key trends and insights as to how those startups found traction. I just extracted a couple of the key principles here, and we'll get to them in the next couple of slides. But ultimately, what they uncovered and the beauty of this framework is that startups essentially uncover traction and find traction from 19 different channels. Some of the challenges and the mistakes they see founders make is that they find that founders, and we observe this a lot with African founders in our programs, is founders tend to have bias, right? They feel that some channels they have experience in, they've potentially sold products in this channel, they have domain expertise in a specific industry or vertical, and they have a sense that that channel is the right channel to reach their audiences with. And so they double down on those, and they kind of have this bias and almost this refusal to test other channels, or this kind of anxiety against testing other channels because it seems like a bit of unknown. The other key challenge that we see founders face is that it's very difficult to predict these things, right? Because of the fact that we said that your business model is different, your audience is different, your customer journey is different, so much is different about your business. It's very difficult to predict where that traction will come from. So it's kind of difficult to look at a business, look at a startup, and very quickly know that this is a channel that will potentially work for you. So predicting what traction channel will work for you, what channel will work to unlock traction, is extremely difficult. The other really interesting insight, and I implore everyone on this call to get a hold of this book and read it. It really is a game changer for founders building early stage businesses. I like to position it as, this is if the lean startup is for the product development life cycle, or the game changer for product development, then Traction is that book for growth marketing. What's interesting about the book and what they get to is that most startups actually achieve traction from a single channel, and some of the use cases they explore and cover are the likes of Airbnb, and many of you will be aware of this kind of channel that they use to unlock traction for their business at a really early stage. That was engineering as a channel. So they were basically they had used the script, and many of you will be familiar with a website called Craigslist, and it's basically like a directory website in the States. It's got hundreds of millions of users. And what the growth team at Airbnb had kind of discovered is that they could write the script. This is back in way before there were APIs for websites like Craigslist, and they developed the script that basically pulled room listings from Airbnb and listed them on Craigslist for free. Because Craigslist is a free listing website, they could pull those rooms for rent and available straight onto Craigslist, and listed them and kind of advertised them to hundreds of millions of users for free on Craigslist. The other that they cover is like Dropbox, and so many of you probably are familiar with the fact how Dropbox unlocked traction for their business at a really early stage by using a viral marketing or referral program, where they basically, once you hit that cap, you had an initial cap of 250 megs free use of Dropbox, and once you hit that cap, they sent you this notification or this email that said, look, you've reached your 250 meg cap with Dropbox. In order to unlock 250 megs free, more or another 250 megs free, refer 3 of your friends, and we'll give all of them 250 megs, and we'll give you 250 megs free storage with Dropbox. And that was the catalyst. That was the traction channel to take Dropbox from hundreds of thousands of users to suddenly millions of users. And so the key fact there is, I've used a couple of examples there, but the key fact is that many startups, many startups who get this traction point right unlock traction from a single channel. Okay, so let's get into the actual framework of it. And this is a framework that we pose, and it's very much using the methodology and the mindset of growth as a process, as opposed to identifying one-off tactics. And the bullseye framework, as you probably guessed, it looks exactly like a dartboard with a bullseye in the middle. And basically, there are the 19 different traction channels, the way early stage startups can unlock traction. Everything from email marketing to PR to offline events and viral marketing, to speaking engagements or meetups, to direct sales, offline ads, blog marketing and content marketing. Basically, these are the 19 different traction channels that startups can use to find traction for their business. And basically, the way the framework works, or the methodology works, is that they propose that you ideate around each one of these channels. So come up with an idea or an experiment to run for each one of these traction channels. List them out. List out an experiment or an idea you have for each one of these traction channels in reaching your audience. And so you'll have 19 different experiments. In some circumstances, you might come up with 2 or 3 different experiments for each channel. So you'll have dozens of different experiments to run. And then what you do is you prioritize. You take the next step and you prioritize which one of those channels you believe will be most effective in generating growth for your business. And you'll use everything from case studies or existing data that you might have from a channel that you would have been exposed to before, or that you've potentially seen other businesses be effective at, and you basically score them and you prioritize them, and you use this very rudimentary scoring system called an ICE scoring system, which I imagine many of you are familiar with this. It's impact, confidence, and ease. And so what is the impact of this channel? What is the impact of this experiment to my business? What is the confidence that I have that this experiment will work? And what is the ease that it takes to execute this? Everything based around resources. And you give it a very rudimentary score. And so once you've listed these 19 different experiments that you want to run, identify the 6 by the prioritization phase, identify 6 channels that you believe are the most effective that you should use to go out and find traction with your startups. And then you go out and test them, right? You implement them and you go out and test them. You flight the experiments, you run the tests, and see what feedback you get. And basically what we observe from the startups in our program is that they start running these 6 experiments, and what you start to do is you get signals back from certain experiments you run. Suddenly you'll be running a Facebook ads campaign, and your leads will 3x or 5x overnight. And you'll suddenly start seeing leads coming in, or you'll start testing channels where it's like content marketing, and you were adamant that this was a channel that was going to unlock growth for your enterprise or B2B business, and you'll be stumped. You'll say, like, we thought growth marketing was or content marketing was going to be this ultimate traction channel for us, and the evidence that we're seeing is just customers are just not they are not responding to this. But we are seeing signals from another channel we're testing, something like meetups or trade shows or direct sales may be giving you evidence. And so you basically move these channels into the inner rings until you get to that inner bullseye where you're testing between 1 and 3 traction channels. And then you start to double down and you get signals and you get evidence that these channels are really working for you. So you can focus on them and you can spend more time, instead of focusing on 19 different channels or the 6 different channels that you prioritized, you can start to double down on the 1 or 2 or 3 channels that are really driving growth for your business. And so we basically use this cheat sheet, which we share with a lot of our startups, which is basically like breaks this growth process down into the different stages of growth. Pretty much 3 principal stages of growth: traction, transition, and growth. What we find is early stage businesses, predominantly the businesses that come through our Founders Factory Africa programs, find themselves in this first stage, this traction phase. And in fact, most startups find themselves here, right? Even if they don't like to admit it. Their goal is really to find product market fit with some subset of audience. The key metric that's going to give them the evidence and the indications that they have found product market fit are metrics like retention. And this is really like you're just turning on the tap here. You're getting a steady flow of customers coming through using your product. You're experimenting with 2 or 3 channels, like I said, that bullseye spot, in order to focus on one channel, to find that single traction channel that's going to unlock that explosive growth for your business.
The
optimizations that you're trying to make here are very much at a macro level, right? You're focusing on big macro level experiments or optimizations. So you are testing, like, let's see how content marketing works for our business, for our enterprise or B2B business. Then if that doesn't work, let's test direct sales, or let's test speaking engagements. Let's go to events or conferences or virtual conferences to try and unlock growth. And you're doing these macro level optimizations for your business. Very often the team is one, right? Very often we find in our program, that's the founder himself or herself doing the work at this point. They are setting up Facebook ads or attending conferences or sending out emails to potential prospects. So your team is basically one. The follow-up step to that is the transition phase. And this is when you found that initial traction, you've got that kind of steady flow of customers coming to use your product. And that's when you start to identify and try to scale up, and you're trying to identify like growth levers. Your optimization metric kind of shifts away from retention and focuses more on retention, on a growth rate. How can you focus on your cost to acquire customers? You're basically trying to balance it out with the lifetime value that you have, and you're really turning up the faucet here. You're starting to drive more growth, more users, more customers coming through your product. You're still focusing, you're doubling down on that one channel, but what you start to do is actually start to do micro optimizations. So now that you've identified your single traction channel, you might have identified a channel like SEO or Facebook ads. Many of the startups that come through our program find traction with Facebook ads, and then it's about them experimenting with the different ad placements. So they might explore lead generation ads, or they might explore retargeting ads through Facebook, or dynamic creative insertion. When they start to input for e-commerce platforms or subscription businesses, they might insert dynamic creative into it. Your team starts to scale a little bit. You grow to 3 or 4 members of the team outside the founder, and then you get to the kind of growth stage. This is really where startups get to a Series A level, and you've really secured funding, and you start to build a team of specialists, right? So you might have an SEO specialist growth team, or a paid marketing specialist growth team, or a content marketing team, and really that's when you try and drive efficiency in reducing your cost to acquire customers, being ratios generally around 1 to 3. So your cost to acquire a customer comes at a third of your lifetime value. Your payback period starts to grow as your kind of diminishing returns on each channel, and there's more competition. But really, we find most early stage startups need to focus on this initial traction phase. And this is a kind of cheat sheet as to how to apply that growth as a process methodology and principle to the different stages of growth. I'm just conscious of time here. The final thought on this is really a bit of an observation and kind of feedback from the dozens of startups that we have through our program. And that is that initially, it seems like an incredibly simple process. It seems so obvious, right? And the beauty is actually in its simplicity. And like I say there is actually nothing all that special about this process. The way to uncover traction for early stage startups is to go out there and experiment your way to success. Use a fundamental, well-structured principle and methodology and framework to going out to uncover evidence and areas that you can identify to unlock your unique set of variables that'll drive growth for your business. And really, it doesn't come down to much more than 3 very key factors. Where we see this framework fall over is when founders give up, they give in, they feel like that they've explored everything they can. They don't believe that they should start testing more channels, or they are stubborn to persist with a single channel, even though it's not working for them. And very often it's about like generating some kind of momentum over perfection, keep testing the channels, drive a sense of grit and perseverance, and you will eventually find that traction for you. And it's really about running through the process, keeping up that speed and the cadence with the growth team, keeping up that experiment cadence until you find the signals, and then double down on those to drive sustainable, predictable, scalable growth for your business. So yeah, a little bit of learning throughout the startups that we've seen. I think we're spot on time, about 30 minutes, so plenty of time for any questions. I will just stop my share here just to see if there are any questions in the chat. Or anybody feels like posing any questions at all about anything at all. It doesn't have to be growth marketing and Founders Factory, challenges you're facing with your business. Happy to pose or answer any questions anyone might have.
Hello, I have a question, but this one is in regards to my team or my startup. So my challenge is, okay, we are a startup and currently we are friends. So no one is being paid, but eventually, the story will come up. How will you compensate us? So as the founder, what other alternatives are there for compensating the value that the first initial employees give you? So if you don't want to give away equity, so how do you compensate that?
Look, that is a difficult challenge for sure. Generally, what we find is the founding team of the startup will almost always form part of the equity scheme. So they will either have a good share in the business or be part of an employee share option program. It is very difficult to extract the kind of perseverance and grit and performance out of an early stage team if there isn't some kind of incentive offered to them. I think the other important principle here is that you don't really want to, at that point, when you are a team of 3 or 5 people, you don't really want to be bringing on a team of people who aren't exceptional, who aren't world-class. And if those people are exceptional and world-class and able to build a unicorn business for you, then why wouldn't you want to include them in equity as part of the business? And so I think the key insight there is keep that small team, initial team fairly small at the outset, but make sure you are hiring world-class people that you feel comfortable and that you feel like giving them equity in the business is the right move. And that is the way that you will extract high quality performance and get the most value out of that initial team. I'll just stop for any other questions. I see there's one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Akunda Tamitokwe. I lead growth at Printivo. It's an online printing company, more suited to like a Vista print, if you're familiar with that in the US. So my question goes to the issue about nuancing. The issue being that not many people are more, especially in these emerging markets, especially in Africa, have, how will I put it, very tactical knowledge around growth, right? It's actually something literally new in this part of the company and earth. And so even getting to hire talents is actually the most difficult thing you'll find, because many people are either marketing or not, I like actually marketing background, but not very concise around growth. And so how has been, I mean, your advice on getting the best, or how will I put it, the best people you feel would grow into this role, or you feel are the dynamics or the kind of people you think can become growth managers or can help in extracting those data that you can use to scale? Because a lot of growth in my own experience, minus the tactics and ideas, is the data and how to analyze that data to unlock more growth. So yeah.
Got it. That is a great question, and that is a challenge and a question we pose to ourselves as Founders Factory Africa all the time. This is a fundamental learning that we've identified over the years of all these startups coming through our programs, is that many of them, almost 99% of them, do not have a growth marketer on their team. They basically keep growth as this afterthought. There is this kind of expansive and over focus on building product up to the certain point, and then they leave growth as an afterthought. So the tendency from African founders is that their entire focus needs to be on building this product. Then they're going to build the product, they're going to get to the point, and then they're going to go, okay, VP of sales or marketing, off you go, here's the product is ready to be shipped, off you go and sell this thing. And that is way too late to be thinking about growth, right? The principle from that book Traction, which I implore all of you to read, is that in fact, early stage founders should be using what's called the 50% principle, the 50% rule. Early stage founders should be spending 50% of their time building product and 50% of their time finding traction. And introducing growth at that late stage is too late. So that's the first point, is make sure that you are introducing that mindset and that concept of unlocking traction for your startup super early on. You can start collecting evidence and running experiments around what channels will work for your business way before your product is ready to ship that version 1, right? So when you've got an MVP out there or a prototype out there, already start to test the waters with what traction channels will work for you. So start that growth principle, that growth process super early on. To answer the second part of your question, that's really around like, how do we find the talent in Africa to do this? And this is a question we pose to ourselves a lot at Founders Factory Africa. And actually, it's a really interesting insight that we've uncovered over the years. And that is really that much of the growth marketing skills and that traction framework that I presented, many of those channels, those skills are actually not all that complex. And many of the skills that are required to run those different channels, like SEO, like content marketing, like paid ads or social media marketing, or speaking engagements, all of those things are actually skills and talents that sit with a kind of everyday digital marketer. And the nuance and the insight that we've discovered on the African continent is actually that those digital marketers who possess those skills and talents aren't attracted to startups, right? And it's obvious. If you're a young digital marketer and you have a big bank in Nigeria offering you a big salary to go and do digital marketing for them, that's the job you're going to take, right? Which means that startups suffer as a result of that, because all this talent and all the skill that they need to run those 19 traction channels are sitting with corporates, and but the beauty is that they're actually just pretty regular digital marketers. And if founders can identify them and understand that principle, they can help them learn that methodology. And so the talents and the skills that it takes to run SEO and run a paid ads campaign on Facebook and run a LinkedIn ads campaign or content marketing, those skills are fairly easy to come by. What you need to do and focus on as founders is to how do you have them embrace this mindset and this methodology of the startup approach, right? So how do you run rapid experimentation? How do you focus on weekly optimizations? So rather than having them do these like 3 to 6 month marketing plans or 12 or 24-month marketing plans? How do you focus on going, how can we test 3 channels in the next 3 weeks, right? 1 channel per week. How can we ship these experiments as quickly as possible? And so we strongly believe as Founders Factory Africa that the skills and talent to unlock growth and growth marketers are actually sitting with fairly abundant resources in digital marketers. And it's actually this methodology, it's this mindset of this, this traction process and this growth process that is really like missing to unlock growth marketing on the continent. I'm not sure if that answers your question or if you have any comments on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I've read Traction Channel quite a long time ago, and interestingly, some feedback. I was just looking more from a nuanced conversation around Africa, because most times when we get to talk about growth, we're trying to say, let's copy a bit from what Silicon Valley is doing. Yes, those 19 tractions channels are working. And interestingly, in these places here, it's more about 2 major things: the consumer behavior, which is very crazy to understand, price sensitive, and especially relationship and adjacent market growth strategies. From your core experience, like this is just me talking, how has it been in terms of, let's say, founder has this great idea, they raise investments and they get the first hire and they're trying to unlock that very first pre-traction business. Now, the first question is they're already coming with a premise and a notion of this idea to market, and they've currently got a good number on the waiting list, and of course, they launch their business and suddenly nothing happens. Those pre-launch list people kind of just don't want to use the product anymore. The advice is,
I think I understand your question. Is that like these principles, and yes, this framework was developed in the United States in sophisticated kind of startup ecosystems. What we've observed is that fundamentally the principle and the methodology is sound, and the principle and the methodology is what helps African startups unlock traction too. And so while there might be nuances, as you correctly state, there might be nuances in certain channels and the types of audiences that may not resonate well with a specific channel, or some tactic that worked well in the States or in Europe in a more sophisticated market. In fact, the principle of identifying what those unique set of variables are to unlock growth for your principle works for African startups too. And as long as you believe in the process and you trust the process, that you will find those. And yes, your customer is different, but if you run enough experiments, you will identify the traction channel that works for your customers to unlock that growth for you. So yes, the underlying principle is that we have found that certainly some tactics that work in other markets don't necessarily translate very well to an African context, but the principle and the methodology behind this framework is extremely sound. And we've had extensive evidence of startups coming through our program, testing multiple channels, and they may have said there's a B2B business in Nairobi. We've seen them unlock growth through direct sales. We want to test the same channel, and they go after it, and they kind of throw the kitchen sink at it and get nothing. And then they kind of adopt the methodology and go, well, let's explore other channels, and eventually find their channel that unlocks growth because their customer journey was different, because the nuance, as you put it, with their audience or their price sensitivity nuance with their customer was different, and so a different channel unlocked growth for them. So as long as you believe in the process and trust the process of identifying those unique set of variables, the principle and the methodology is certainly sound, and we have evidence of that.
Hi, hello everyone. So do we still have questions? In your role, are you trying to raise your hands to ask a question? Okay. So do we have any more questions from anybody?
Hey, Steve, I think some of the guys and girls want a copy of your presentation. Is it okay if we share that with them, or is that not?
Absolutely. Absolutely, which I'll share that with you and give you a PDF version of it, so it's easy to share and pass around. Very, very happy to do that. And also happy to share my contact details. Anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, via email. Very happy to answer any questions. We are always very excited to speak to communities like this. Our whole kind of value and our principles around this as Founder Factory Africa is we need to encourage and empower founders and growth marketers like yourselves, and that's how we're going to drive growth for the ecosystem and for the continent as a whole. So very happy to field any questions at all, and please reach out to me.
Fantastic. So what we owe the audience is going to be, we're going to send over the recording. We're going to send over a copy of Steve's presentation and also his social media handles. Okay. Thank you so very much, Steve, for taking the time and effort. Like from what I can see, it's pretty late and dark in South Africa right now, and I know that you have a whole family that you need to go take care of. So thank you for spending your time with us and passing on your expertise. Without further ado, we're definitely over time here, but let's end it there. And guys, if you have questions for Steve, you can connect with him over Twitter, and I'll send over his email as well. Cool. Let's end it there, guys. Thank you. And
thanks, everyone.
Take care, Steve.
Go well. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, cheers, Steve. Bye.